Despite my best intentions, I was overwhelmed by the majesty of the Ludwig mansion. Winning a war against a neighboring country was a big deal. No wonder Count Riegelhoff felt jealous of the Ludwigs. At the front entrance, we were greeted by a butler, and we were ushered into a large dining room. Anyway, it didn't matter to me. It's more important that I don't get beaten up for interrupting the negotiations. I took a slow, deep breath, trying not to show my nervousness, and followed behind Count Riegelhoff and Edith's brother, Shane Riegelhoff. At one side of a large, elongated table are the members of the Ludwig family. I didn't think much of it when I saw Count Riegelhoff, but when I saw the family of the main characters, I was excited. Duke Axel Ludwig, and next to him is Duchess Jocelyn Ludwig, and a male lead, Cliff. As expected, the male lead is so handsome, with black hair and golden eyes. He looks cold when he shows no expression, but when he smiles, his beauty is inhuman. His muscular body is printed under his clothes. And he's the one who will marry Liz, the female lead, who sits next to him. Liz Sinclair, despite not being a member of the Ludwig family, who also attends the dinner, is so beautiful that the novel describes her as the goddess of spring. Light blonde hair that seemed to flow on its own. Her eyes as blue as the river. Smooth and soft-looking fair skin. And a delicate body that I wanted to protect. I can see now why Edith is so crazy about him. He's an enemy, but with that visual, you have no choice but to be crazy about him. Killian Ludwig is a handsome man with black hair and mysterious grey eyes that give him a somewhat rebellious aura. His furrowed brows, a cold gaze that shows discomfort, a straight, sharp nose and jawline, and an overall more sensual face than Cliff's. His physique is similar to Cliff's, with a broad chest, a slim waist, and then again, thick thighs. I had to force myself to keep my mouth shut, as I felt the word wow coming out of my mouth. But as if I were the only one mesmerized by Killian's beauty. Count Riegelhoff's brow furrowed in displeasure seeing Liz joining in the dinner. The Duke of Ludwig explained that Liz was already a part of the family, and it would be good to say hello, as we would see each other often in the future. But he didn't look too pleased either. It was clear that if the Count said one more word, he wouldn't let it go. I tried to defuse the situation before it got out of hand. But Liz spoke first and tried to leave. Killian grabbed Lizé's wrist as soon as she turned to leave, preventing her from leaving. In the original story, it's written that Edith's eyebrows rose sharply at this moment, but I have no intention of doing so. My life depended on looking good to Liz, and I wanted to get to know her more. I couldn't tell if I smiled properly because I was nervous, but I did my best anyway to prevent him from prolonging the commotion. Count Riegelhoff nodded and smiled humanely. Wow, this is a thing the Count to say that Liz is kind of a little sister to Killian. I fidgeted inwardly, but Killian didn't say anything and looked away. Liz could only stare at him in bewilderment, as he dodged the question without answering. Duke Ludwig quieted the uncomfortable atmosphere as if to say that he would not allow any further disturbances, and the waiting servants began to serve the food. For the world of aristocracy in a Rofen novel, where all you have to do is sit still, a sumptuous menu prepared by the best chefs is placed right in front of you. I was worried that Count Riegelhoff was going to go off on a rant again, but he's very civilized and polite in front of everyone, probably because he's the kind of person who stabs in the back with a smile. But it was all a facade. After our second glass of wine, Count Riegelhoff cut to the chase. With the caring tone he made, he asked for the Duke's permission to send some servants with Edith because he was worried about Edith's comfort, soon living at the house of Ludwig. It was not an ordinary servant, but all mercenaries trained in assassination and theft, especially Sophia, who'd been assigned to guard and watch over Edith at the Riegelhoff mansion. She is the one who helped Edith do most of her evil deeds in the original story. In other words, My life would be considerably safer if I didn't take Sophia with me. The Duke of Ludwig nodded with a look that said, "It's finally happening." He was a perceptive man that he didn't immediately answer. After all, even Edith could be seen as a spy for the Riegelhoffs, and it would not be a place for Count Riegelhoff to bring more of his people. In many ways, the conversation was in Count Riegelhoff's favor, until he insinuated Duchess Ludwig, who also brought her maid in when she married Duke Ludwig, so that he can get permission to bring Sophia in with Edith. Count Riegelhoff looked at me again, with a kind and affectionate look on his face, as if to conclude the negotiation. I felt a chill run down my spine, at the thought of bursting into tears at any moment, but I had to keep my wits about me. My decision here would determine my life. I chose to ignore him. I would not bring in his people, with an excuse that the servants at Ludwig's family could serve me as well as the servants at home. So he didn't need to send a servant with me, and I told them that they can forget my father's request. The Duke and his two sons were watching me with sharp eyes. They seemed to think I was going to cushion myself, and then demand other terms. But I am innocent, gentlemen. The Duke of Ludwig sounds like he's in trouble. When I said to forget father's request, I can't be weak-hearted here, and I can't be seen as a spoiled lady. I tried to smile as benignly as I could, but the corners of Edith's eyes were slightly upturned, making it difficult for me to put on an innocent face. The Duke and Duchess nodded their heads in agreement, albeit with a hint of irritation, and Count Riegelhoff's face hardened. As soon as we were in the carriage and out of the mansion gate, Count Riegelhoff's anger burst out. I was afraid he would hit me, but I'm glad he didn't. From now on, I have to act with all my might. I said that his plan had been read by Duke Ludwig, and I had no choice but to block him. Count Riegelhoff's eyelids trembled at my words. It must have been strange to hear his daughter, who was always so good at doing what he told her to do, stand up and say something out of the field. But I couldn't back out now, I added, because there was no point bringing in a maid if his intentions were already suspect. Instead, it would clarify their suspicions, which would ultimately destroy the purpose of this marriage. Well, that's what you get when you're a marketing department staff speaker on the Korean Peninsula, who's been practicing presentation skills since college. As if on cue, Count Riegelhoff's fierce expression softened and asked my next step. I replied, I would assuage their suspicions of me first by entering Ludwig's myself and then making any excuse to bring in Riegelhoff's servant. In the end, the Count was persuaded by me. I felt as if the sword aimed at my throat had moved 10 centimeters away. And here I am, after a crazy week, standing in this black comedy of a wedding. The priest is still reciting prayers. In Korea, the trend is to do away with long, boring ceremonies, but I guess that hasn't caught on here yet. And finally, the exchange of rings. I turned toward Killian as I had practiced. Unlike me, who turned easily in my uncomfortable dress, he turned slowly, barely, as if he didn't want to do it. His formal attire, now that I could see it properly, was stunningly gorgeous. But I felt like I was asking for a major accident if I stared at him now. Fortunately, this revealing dress was keeping me sane. I know how you feel, Killian, so let's get this over with. I mean it. I want this uncomfortable and awful time to be over too. 2 ring bearers approached with the rings on a small cushion. They couldn't be more than 7 years old, and they are so cute. In contrast to the adults of both families, who looked as if they were about to eat each other, the cheeks of these children were flushed with the joy of being a part of a beautiful wedding. I could only smile at them as they melted my heart. Killian glared at me, then picked up the ring. I politely held out my left hand, and Killian slipped the bridal ring onto my left ring finger, barely touching my hand. He didn't even support my left hand with his other hand. What happened next was even worse. He reached out and snatched the groom's ring. Before I could pick it up, he put it on himself and then stood facing the priest, as if he had finished his business. I was the only one standing awkwardly facing him, trying to pick up the ring. The guests from the groom's side burst into laughter, and the guests from the bride's side looked like they would rise in anger at any moment. I wasn't okay with it, but showing my displeasure would only make things worse. I kissed the children lightly on the cheeks, and turned to face the priest. I felt the faint chill radiating from Killian and thought to myself, it's okay to not have a man in my life. I should be content to have a good life, and a healthy body after nothing. But I'll be punished if I'm greedy enough to want a man. A life of leisurely enjoyment of my hobbies, without fear of being beaten by my father or brother. How nice. If I'm lucky, I'll be able to use the heir's excuse to sleep with that handsome, fit man a few times. If that doesn't work out and I'm lonely, I'll make a lover later. Okay, that's it. I resolved once again to give up on the row in the Rofan, and enjoy the fan to the fullest.